Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Doctrine, Dogma, and Davide podcast. My name is Davide, and today I want to discuss some comments that Pope Francis made last month in Singapore at a conference of young people for interreligious dialogue. Now, I realize that I'm a little bit late to the party on this one, but for those of you who didn't hear about this, Pope Francis was at this conference for interreligious dialogue and made the following comments. He said, "One of the things that has impressed me about the young people here is your capacity for interfaith dialogue. This is very important because if you start arguing, my religion is more important than yours, or mine is the true one and yours is not true, where does this lead? Somebody answer." A young person answers, "Destruction." That is correct. All religions are paths to God. I will use an analogy. They are like different languages that express the divine. But God is for everyone, and therefore we are all God's children. But my God is more important than yours. Is this true? There is only one God, and religions are like languages, paths to reach God. Some Sikh, some Muslim, some Hindu, some Christian. Understood? Yet interfaith dialogue among young people takes courage. The age of youth is the age of courage, but you can misuse this courage to do things that will not help you. Instead, you should have courage to move forward and to dialogue. Based on these comments, many people have accused Pope Francis of expressing the heresy of religious indifferentism, which is the belief that all religions are equivalently, or at least similarly true, meritorious, or salvific. If you've watched my channel in the past, you know that I happily defend Pope Francis when I think he is being mischaracterized, taken out of context, and unfairly attacked. But I do not believe that this is what happened in this case. I've seen some Catholics whom I respect trying to defend what Pope Francis said by focusing on his statement that, quote, all religions are paths to God, and explaining how this statement can be reconciled with the traditional Catholic teaching. And that's true, that statement can be reconciled with traditional Catholic understanding in the sense that if a person goes from atheism to Islam to Protestantism and then finally accepts the fullness of the gospel in the Catholic Church, it could be said that each religion is a step on the path towards God as they come to accept more and more of what God has revealed to us, and thereby progress towards his Catholic Church. But there are two problems I have with this explanation. The first problem is that if you put yourself in the shoes of a person who does not already understand what the Church teaches on the necessity and the infallibility of the Catholic Church, this is not how you would understand the statement, all religions are a path to God. Because in order to arrive at an understanding of those words, which does conform with the Church's teaching, you have to already know what the Church teaches in the first place. And if you have to already know what's being taught in order to understand the lesson, you're not being a good teacher. So even if the Pope's words aren't erroneous, they would still be worthy of criticism. The second problem I have is that while many times it's the critics of Pope Francis who will take his words out of context to accuse him of heresy, here I think it's actually Pope Francis's defenders who are taking him out of context in order to defend him. So let's look again a little more carefully at what he actually said. First he says, quote, if you start arguing, my religion is more important than yours, or mine is the true one and yours is not true, where does this lead? Somebody answer. A young person answers, destruction. That is correct. So what is Pope Francis saying? He says that to say, my religion is more important, or mine is true and yours is false, this leads to destruction. But to say that the Catholic faith is true and all others are false to varying degrees is Catholic doctrine. And the Church has also always maintained that the fullness of truth of the gospel is superior, or in other words, more important than the various falsehoods that are opposed to it. Yet Pope Francis says that for me to say these truths of the Catholic faith leads to destruction. It's true that other religious communities do have more or less truth in them, and it is good to recognize the truths that we do share with those who are Sikh, Muslim, or Hindu. Every Catholic has an obligation to affirm the superiority of the fullness of truth over and above the profession of a mixture of truths and falsehoods, such as are found in other religious communities. Pope Francis then goes on to say that all religions are a path to God, but he further clarifies what he means by this when he says, I will use an analogy. They are like different languages that express the divine, but God is for everyone, and therefore we are all God's children. but my God is more important than yours. Is this true? There is only one God, and religions are like languages, paths to reach God. Some Sikh, some Muslim, some Hindu, some Christian. Here, Francis is correct when he says that there is no my God or your God. There is only one. You either believe in God or you don't. And the First Vatican Council dogmatically defined that you can know the one true God by reason without necessarily accepting all the truths of revelation. It says, quote, if anyone says that the one true God, our Creator and Lord, cannot be known with certainty from the things that have been made by the light of natural human reason, let him be anathema. But where Pope Francis goes astray here is when he says that the different religions are like languages to express the divine. Because this is to say that different religions are just different ways of expressing the same thing. Now, this statement would be true if it were said of, say, the different rites of the church, such as the Melkite or the Ruthenian rite, because they actually are genuinely different expressions of the same Catholic truth. But this is simply not true of other religious communities, such as Muslims, Hindus, Protestants, and the like. When a Christian says that God is triune and a Muslim says that God is not triune, we are not expressing the same thing in different ways. We are making fundamentally different claims about what God has revealed to us about himself. And it is only through Jesus Christ that one can come to God and be saved, as the Second Vatican Council says in Lumen Gentium, paragraph 14, quote, basing itself on sacred scripture and tradition, it teaches that the Church, now sojourning on earth as an exile, is necessary for salvation. Christ, present to us in his body, which is the Church, is the one mediator and the unique way of salvation. In explicit terms, he himself affirmed the necessity of faith and baptism, and thereby affirmed also the necessity of the Church, for through baptism, as through a door, men enter the Church. Whosoever, therefore, knowing that the Catholic Church was made necessary by Christ, would refuse to enter or to remain in it could not be saved. And in Vatican II's decree on ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, Unitatis Redintegratio, it states, quote, the Church, then, is God's only flock. It is like a standard lifted high for the nations to see it, for it serves all mankind through the gospel of peace, as it makes its pilgrim way in hope toward the goal of the fatherland above. So it would almost seem that Pope Francis, by his comments in Singapore, is accusing Vatican II of leading to destruction on account of its fidelity to Catholic teaching. But when we engage in interreligious dialogue, we are not permitted to omit these truths, as Unitatis Redintegratio goes on to say that while, quote, the way and method in which the Catholic faith is expressed should never become an obstacle to dialogue with our brethren, it goes on to say that it is, of course, essential that the doctrine should be clearly presented in its entirety. Nothing is so foreign to the spirit of ecumenism as a false erroneousism, in which the purity of Catholic doctrine suffers loss and its genuine and certain meaning is clouded. And this is also what the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith under Pope Pius XII on ecumenical dialogue stated in De Motione Oecumenica, quote, therefore, the whole and entire Catholic doctrine is to be presented and explained. By no means is it permitted to pass over in silence or to veil in ambiguous terms the Catholic truth regarding the nature and way of justification, the constitution of the Church, the primacy of jurisdiction of the Roman Pontiff, and the only true union by the return of the dissidents to the one true Church of Christ. And if you're interested in a more detailed explanation of the Church's teaching on ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, I did a detailed explanation in a past episode that you can find linked in the description down below. Now, it's a possibility that this is not what Francis intended to express. Perhaps he was just intending to communicate that we should be cordial and charitable as we dialogue with one another, and that we should focus first on points of agreement before we discuss our differences. But if that's all he intended to say, then he said it really, really badly. And as Catholics, we should not be disrespectful of the Holy Father, but we should criticize him in a spirit of filial piety when he makes a mistake or even an error in judgment. And it's also worth remembering that the Pope in this case is not speaking infallibly, he's speaking in an informal setting. And so he's not speaking in any sort of magisterial way. Nothing he said was infallible. And so the Pope can make mistakes just like everyone else. And while I don't approve of people just reflexively bashing the Pope, especially when he's being taken out of context, I also don't approve of bending over backwards to try to defend every word that comes out of his mouth as though he can never make a mistake or an error in judgment. But those are just my thoughts. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments down below. If you liked this video and it was spiritually fruitful for you, please consider supporting me on Patreon, and be sure to like, comment, share, do whatever it is that people of the internet do, and I will see you all in the next video. God bless you.